I'm Dane Rose, and in this video we'll explore the function of patterns. The first function of a pattern, and a pattern is simply a loop, right? It goes round and round. The first function of a pattern is to allow sleep. The amount of awareness that it takes to be totally present in all areas in a single moment is too vast for the sense of I, for ego. And so the I cannot hold a billion languages, a billion directions. It's just it's too big. And so the purpose of a pattern, and there's a series of nested hierarchical patterns, is to create a place for sleep, to create a place for the illusion of identity. Right? So you have a pattern, and then you have a nested pattern within that pattern, and then you have a nested pattern within that pattern, right? And then we go to sleep within that symmetry, within that pattern. And without that sleep, there is just overwhelming hell, overwhelming horror, just the awesomeness of reality. And the ego experiences some of this in psychedelics, right? Where there's just so much, and there's no pattern, there's no resting point, there's simply presence. And so an ego can identify, which is a pattern of attaching itself, identify to a pattern, right? Of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Now, the other purpose of a pattern is to create the illusion of space and time. And space and time give you the ability to learn. If everything is different in each moment, you cannot create a correlation. You cannot create a relationship of, when I eat bananas, my stomach is like this. When I eat cherries, my stomach is like this, right? So how do you create that correlation? Well, you eat only bananas, and a good chunk of them, that's a pattern, right? Then you don't eat anything and you feel this way, right? And then on another time, you eat only cherries, right? And you feel this way, right? And so that allows you to say, aha, right? Bananas make me feel like this. This makes me feel like this. And so when you maintain most of your life, right? I always get up at this time. I always sleep at this time. I always go jogging at this time. When this stays a pattern, and so you have a series of routines, repetitions, and then you bring in one new variable, and the energy shifts, right? The energy shifts. Then you have, right, something's different. And you can make a connection. You can learn, oh, when I think this belief, I feel like this. Something changed. But how could you do that if all of this was just a constant, soup of, how could you make a connection between, this and this, right? You can't. And so what establishing a pattern, a routine, this is the system. This is the system, right? And then dun, dun, right? Now you have a new variable, you have a new energy. You notice a clear distinction. Something's different, right? And you can make a connection. You can have an insight, right? You change something on the inside. You change a pattern that affects the inside. And then you look inward, you have an insight, and you see, oh, that belief changes this feeling. That's an insight, right? So a pattern that is stable, a routine, provides the basis, the foundation for a variation. And when you have this, and you see what the result of that is, and then you do this, and you see what the result of that is, you have an insight, and suddenly the pattern opens up, right? And that connects with this. How could you do that without patterns? How could the eye witness a variation if there wasn't a routine, a pattern, and then a new pattern, right? And so this is how, this is how drugs are created, right? They have the placebo, they have this, and this, and then they introduce a new pattern, and they say, we just killed the patient. Okay, well, right, well, delete that. Let's do this. Okay, right, eyes are watering, heartburn, no change in the kid. Okay, let's do this, right? And so a pattern provides a foundation upon which to found an anomaly, a variation. But the eye is so narrow in its processing capacity, and it's that it likes mostly pattern and then a little bit of anomaly, a little bit of change, right? We always get together on Fridays, but maybe this time we'll go to a new restaurant. Is that too radical? Right? Maybe this time I'll leave off my makeup as I do the same thing I always do with the things, the situations. I always do them in the same place with the same people. And so the purpose of a pattern, of a routine, is to provide sleep, slumber. Don't worry about that. Let's just focus on this one variable that we're changing. So this is a great use of patterns. Now, the other function of a pattern is if all of these are very strong, like you see this isn't very clear, but it's okay. What I mean by that is the fact that this line is up here is going to produce a different result than this line down here. So I'm kind of repeating it. It's like going jogging, but sometimes I go jogging for 300 meters and sometimes I go jogging for 370 meters. It's kind of the same pattern. I go jogging with the same clothes, with the same body, in the same place at the same time of day, but I change the meters a little bit. And so there's going to be a different result, right? I might start cramping after a big dinner at this level, but not quite hit the cramp threshold at this lower level, right? And so one of the functions of standardization is to be able to measure exactly how big the impact of the anomaly is, right? Because if you can have everyone do the exact same thing in the same way at the same time for the same length in the same space, right? Then you can measure very small changes, right? But if your routine changes a little bit, maybe it's a change from your routine, right? Maybe you leave work 30 minutes early, you skip the traffic, so you have an exciting ride because you skipped the traffic, because you left 30 minutes earlier, right? Then that variable becomes inconstant, right? And so you can be confusing. You say, I sometimes enjoy driving home from work, but most of the time I don't, and I'm not quite sure why, because I always drive home from work. Well, one time you skipped the traffic. You left 30 minutes earlier or 30 minutes later. You just missed the bubble. You took a different route. And then, so then you're just like, what's good about today? Well, I don't know. Well, that variable changed. So when you have a solid foundation of pattern, then you can precisely measure the impact of a new variable. And the more standardized the situation and the greater the attention is, the more you can notice something that's very, very tiny. But it still has an impact that you can see if you zoom in and pay attention to it. Now, what is so these are the benefits of a pattern. What are the costs of a pattern? Well, the first thing to understand is that every time you create a pattern, it is a sleep, right? Once you have a habit, you do it unconsciously, you put yourself into a trance, right? Put yourself into a trance, and the pattern repeats. Now, this is great, except for a very important thing, right? As the environment changes, right, in a circular rotation, as the environment changes, a given pattern has a different impact, right? So at age 2, when you cry, maybe you get extra attention, right? That's it right here, age 2. But then you get age 5, age 6. Now you get teased, right? The same pattern, but now you're getting teased. You carry on. Maybe age 12, you don't get any dates, right? Then you come up here, right? And as the reality around us goes through its revolution, its larger pattern, and our pattern stays the same, the pattern that helped us survive becomes the pattern that destroys our life. Everything we want is destroyed. Nobody wants to go out on a date. Nobody wants this. It's the exact same pattern, but the reality has changed, right? And so there's a tremendous savings, there's a tremendous efficiency in putting something on autopilot. Hey, fly this plane, right? So we're going here, we've taken off, let's have a nap, fly this plane. Tremendous benefit of going on autopilot, which is what we do when we fall asleep in a pattern. When you need something, cry. Okay, got it, sleep. But the cost as the environment changes, right? You can put your investment account. Anytime, Tesla goes down, buy. That's the pattern, right? And anytime it goes up, that's the pattern. The problem is the environment is always changing. The environment is always changing. And the pattern that once made you a lot of money eventually bankrupts you, right? 99% of all currencies go to zero over a period of time, right? The currency that once protected you against inflation is now the currency that is inflating, right? The company that once made you a lot of money now loses you all your money. Any stagnant pattern that we fall asleep in, we wake up from the pattern in pain, in trauma, right? Once we've lost everything and we get the bank statement and it's zero, we realize it's a faulty pattern. But it was so good before. In a different environment, the same pattern So when you put something on autopilot, you save 95% of your energy. That's a big savings. If you can put this on autopilot, 95%, right? This on autopilot, 95%, this on autopilot, right? If you can save 95% of your energy by putting all these different patterns, breathing, put it on autopilot, heartbeat, put it on autopilot, right? Urinating, anytime you need to urinate, go to the toilet, put it on autopilot, right? Anytime someone smiles at you, smile at them, put it on autopilot. Anytime you get news, think positive, put it on autopilot, right? It's great, my stocks are going to zero. It's wonderful. Let's look at the bright side. Anytime something comes in, put it on autopilot, right? 95% savings is so easy, right? Just be present, right? Smell the roses, all this stuff is on autopilot. I'm just here. But when the earthquake happens, right? When a volcano, right, jets off, what about that self-driving car? What does it do when a volcano goes off? What does it do? Well, you don't know. You don't know, right? But it's on autopilot. That thing that saves so many lives, right? Because autopilot, it's already 400% better than the average driver, right? So if you're an average driver and you turn on autopilot, it's 400% better. But what if there's a situation where it isn't, right? What if it doesn't know how to deal with hurricanes and, put it in autopilot, that's the fort. And what if there's a hurricane? What if there's a branch flying towards you at 100 miles an hour? What do you do then, right? And, right, so this is the crisis. So you have the savings, the 95% savings, trust the government, trust your parents, doesn't take much effort. Right? See, spot, run. Is that really the best use of my time? See, spot, run. Shut up, do it, right? Okay, there's a spot running. Very efficient, no thinking required. But what happens when your government starts killing you? Because they don't know what they don't know? Because they're getting bribes from this and that and the other, and they don't know enough to know the risks? What happens when the government starts killing you? What happens when you need a vital skill that see, spot, run hasn't prepared you for? Well, then that sleep, the cultural sleep, the personal sleep, the family sleep, right? The species sleep. We don't develop this ability in our species. Why not? Maybe it'll be useful in 1,000 years. Yeah, well, we don't think about that, right? So 95% of all species go extinct. Why? They keep doing what they're doing, and the thing that helped them to get here does not help them to get here. And the environment changes. Life is a circle. What that means is that what was once the very best thing, by the time it comes around here, is the very worst thing. It becomes an okay thing, and then it becomes the very best thing again. If you understand that life is a circle, that reality is a circle, and that a pattern is a fixed point within the circle, right? If you're pointing a gun in a fixed point, right, and the predator runs across the line and shooting kills the predator, and then your daughter runs across the same line and shooting kills your daughter, if you don't change the pattern, what once saved your daughter now kills your daughter. Right? What once helped you get enough attention to live now collapses 95% of your entire probability. Now, there's just one problem with waking up from the pattern, shedding light on the repetition. Well, there's a couple of problems, right? One is overwhelm. If you try to learn a new language while learning a new job, while moving to a new country, while changing your paradigm, while adjusting to a new culture, right? Forget it. I don't know who I am. I'm not doing it, right? We regress to a 1-year-old and I'm not doing it. No, it's too much, right? We try to do too much pattern changing. It's a problem. Now, the other problem is the problem of PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. This comes when an overwhelming sensation, an overwhelming energy that threatens the survival of the eye, threatens the entire pattern. It's like an asteroid hitting, right? It's too fast. We can't possibly respond. It's too fast. We can't respond. We don't know what. So we cling tightly to a tiny little pattern of the moment of the trauma, and we repeat it because the eye does not know who it is without a pattern. And the trauma, which is a pattern, is the strongest pattern the eye can hold to, because the trauma destroyed the old pattern, the identity. It was more powerful, right? The ego doesn't care about pleasure. It doesn't care about happiness. It cares about existing. It cares about not dying. So the ego will do anything to hold on to some pattern, and when the trauma is the loudest pattern, the densest pattern, the winner, right? A traumatic event shatters your identity, your identity. The ego says that pattern isn't safe. I don't want to go back to that pattern. What pattern is strong? The trauma. That's a strong pattern. It ruined my whole identity. If I just relive the trauma over and again, who can take that away from me? Right? It is an instinct for certainty over pleasure, which the ego will take any time. Right? The ego wants to exist and wants to know who it is. Who am I? Right? I am the trauma. Okay. So how do you get an ego to let go of trauma into a chaotic and uncertain environment? You don't, right? It's almost impossible for our cult, our culture, to heal PTSD, because ego is desperately looking for something certain and something solid to hold on to exist. And that just happens to be the most painful, miserable moment of our entire life. It just repeats it over and over and over again. I know who I am. I'm the one who did this. I'm the one who lived this. I'm the one who shot that girl. I'm the one that did this. And the ego is able to hold on to that. No one's able to take it away. Because the ego says that old identity, I could have died, right? This traumatic event just is so much more potent, so much more powerful, so much more stable than that things happen for the best identity or whatever it was. That's not the best. My daughter was, that's not the best. That's insane. I don't know what to make of that, right? But this, right, reliving the worst moment over and over again, right? That's solid. Nobody's been able to stop that. No one was able to prevent it. I'll just hang on to it. The ego loves stable patterns, and the more traumatized the ego, the less it's willing to try new patterns, right? And so the traumatized ego becomes traumatized again and again and again because the traumatized ego picks certainty over anything else. And the only thing that's absolutely certain is the traumatic moments, right? I can hang on to this, nobody can take it away, right? But as you hang desperately onto a certain traumatic moment, life changes, and that pattern eventually creates a new trauma, right? If you don't stop doing this and this and this, you're going to be evicted and this and this. Now you have a new trauma, right? So the traumatized ego moves from trauma to trauma and will not let go for any other reason than a bigger trauma knocking it out of the old traumatic pattern into a new traumatic pattern. And it's so insecure, right? It takes a lot of love to love a traumatized ego in PTSD. And our cult does not produce the temperature, the intensity of passion and care to break through PTSD, to break through a terrified ego holding on to its pattern. Right? The cult doesn't produce a temperature. It gives a little warm glow. The ego says, fuck you, I'm holding on to my pattern. You don't know anything. Right? You're not there for me. You didn't stop the trauma. You're not going to be there with your little new age platitudes, right? When I don't know who I am and I need support and nobody's there, but I can hold on to this indefinitely, right? So we know how to cause the problem. We know how to traumatize most of our people. We just don't know how to heal the trauma reliably, right? And the ego picks certainty over pleasure, over success. The ego just wants to know who it is and hang on to that, because an identity is an I attached to a pattern. And if the pattern can be, just shattered at any given moment, the pattern can be shattered. Then what's there? If the pattern can be shattered, what's there? Yeah. So patterns are everything. You create your own reality. It's just a series of words that are patterns. Words are patterns. Sequencing of words are patterns within patterns, right? Beliefs, patterns within patterns. But the very thing that if you cling to it, that once gave you a ray of light, that later confused you, that another time led you to success, that another time leads people to call you you're crazy, that another time leads you into the depths of confusion and despair. Whatever you cling to as a pattern, as a fixed pattern, I'm going to cling to this because this is who I am, right? And I'm not letting go, says the I, says the ego. Right? It will take you, every fixed point will take you from the full spectrum to heaven, to hell, to dawn, and back to heaven at another level. If you cling on for that period, it'll take you through. Or you'll die as a pattern. The pattern will encounter a larger pattern of energy. 50% of all patterns in reality are bigger than we are. 50% are smaller than we are. Right? So 50% of all life is bigger than us, right? An asteroid hitting the Earth, this or that, this. Any of those patterns. A gun, poison, salmonella. Whew, right? Can cling to the pattern, but they're bigger. And so if there is a an unattuned collision with a larger energy, it is a traumatic event. If we're stuck in the pattern rather than engaging with it, we don't dance with it, we die. Right? We are shocked. Right? I think it's Peng Fu, Bend Not Break. It's a wonderful author exploring, right, the necessity of bending in a totalitarian regime, right, and the flexibility that gives you, right? In the West, where success has been present in geopolitical areas for several generations, right? This is the right way, and we're going to do it our way, and no, we're not going to listen, right? That works in that environment. That exact same attitude will get you dead in a heartbeat when you're the weak one with a bully, right? Right? When you're a small country rather than a superpower. It's the same identity, the same pattern. It's just in one moment, it will give you rank, and in the next moment, it'll kill you, relatively speaking, as nations rise and fall, right, in the pattern of life.